Likewise.
Okay, so we'll just start. I'll introduce the event. I am Ragna, I'm from New York Textile Month. Welcome everybody to one of our first webinars this year's New York Textile Month. And we are happy to have here BYBORRE and his colleagues and partners doing a panel discussion. Last year we had a similar event where you can find that on our YouTube channel. This event will be recorded as well, and we will upload it on our YouTube channel after. I also encourage you to check out our program at textilemonth.nyc to see what's coming this month here in New York, and we also have those international events like this one here. And now I'm just going to give it over to Noah, who is our host for today and the moderator of the panel. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ragna. And thank you to you and the rest of the folks at New York Textile Month and WoTO for helping to facilitate this event. So I'm super excited to be meeting with you guys today and to be leading this conversation on democratizing the textile industry through collaboration. Particularly on why the WoTO collaboration is leading the pathway forward for all players in the textile industry. So before I get started, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have 5 panelists today. They're all partners of the WoTO, and I'll begin with Eva Delot. Eva is the head of Material Experience Center, powered by Sintoni Shanghai, and co-founder of Studio Eva Carola. She has over 20 years of experience in the innovative textile and performance field, and she has worked with world-class brands to create innovative concepts, textiles, and sports apparel, challenging the usual function and aesthetic of conventional designs. Next, I'll go to Hao, who holds an executive MBA and a Master of Science, as well as he is very much certified in business sustainability management. He has more than 18 years of experience in chemicals, plastics, textile, fashion industries with different roles, including research and development, sales and marketing, and business management. I'll speak a little bit about myself, not too much, hopefully. I currently am a designer at Coach, and prior to that, I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology. I also have a background in computer science and graphic design, and I'm quite passionate about sustainability. Borre Akkersdijk is the co-founder of BYBORRE. He's a Dutch textile designer, and he also helped found WoTO. He's been consulting for brands such as Nike and Louis Vuitton throughout his career, and his research into fashion and integrated technology resulted in presentations at South by Southwest, Beijing Design Week, and Salone de Mobile Milano. Karen Pearson is a professor and chair at FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology. I actually had the pleasure to work with Karen while I studied at FIT, and that was, I mean, she knows how much I love her, and I'm grateful to have worked with her. At FIT, she leads the college's Sustainability Council. Her work relates to the creation of a science learning environment for students that focuses on research and problem solving, while engaging students in discussions and examples that address current topics impacting our world through the eyes of chemistry. Finally, Sarah Schlinger is a representative from the Walmart company. She works in research and development, commercialization, and she has 15 years of experience in textile science, animal husbandry, and agriculture. She works across the Americas to execute commercialization of joint developments with brands. So yes, I'm very excited to help to moderate this panel with such an amazing and diverse cast of panelists, all of whom are members of the WoTO network and have experience and work relating to the supply chain and work towards improving transparency in the supply chain, particularly within the textile industry. So I'm going to start with somewhat open-ended questions, and I'll leave kind of like it up to you, the panelists, as to who wants to respond to them. Feel free to just unmute yourself and kind of jump into it. I also have a few more targeted questions based on each of your career paths. depending on how much time we have. But I'll open with the question of what do you view or even hope for as the future of the textile industry, and how does this pertain to the work you do? And if you could maybe each, since this is such kind of a general question, I think will help our audience get a sense of like your background, what your specialty is, and what you're really passionate about. It would be great if maybe we could all try and answer this one question. So I'll repeat it one more time. It's what do you view or even hope for as the future of the textile industry, and how does this pertain to the work that you do?
I'll start. I guess my hope is that, consumers and then in turn brands will demand more natural performance. So seeking natural fibers to replace what typically might have been in their mind only a synthetic fiber solution and performance, and just more consideration for wool in that space.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh,
no, go.
Well, I just think that, yeah, well, I work for a chemical company, so we also supply the synthetic fibers as well. But I mean, in my views, I really hope that in the future, of course, sustainability will always and remain as a very core topic there. But I also would like to see that there are more stakeholders can work together. I think, for example, if you want to use a wool, but I also can thinking about that if we can combine the wool with the synthetic fibers in order to just put all the benefits into one solutions, then actually I think that will make also the consumer enjoy the size sustainability, but also all the performance functions as well. But of course, hopefully that the price will be affordable as well. I think that's will become ideal world for sustainable fashion forward.
Yeah, great question, Noah. Yeah, we believe everything in what we do should be considered smart and functional. The textiles what we wear, and I think you should really help to enhance and augment a person's experience. So in our opinion, I don't think we don't need more design, we need better design. We need something that comes together in defining new ways of co-creation, co-production, co-analysis, co-marketing. So really to create a more open and transparent supply chain. I think that would be really my future wish.
I think speaking to this from the educational side is I see so much great opportunity for the textile industry across the board. I see it with natural fibers. I see it in the supply chain. I see it even with synthetics and new biomaterials as they come forward. And I think the real challenge is to continue the work. And I think one of the things that we've done with the WoTO group is really kind of started to create this pathway of collaboration across all of the disciplines. From we can't look at this through a single lens as to how it only one pathway kind of works or solves the problem. I think we can really change the whole impact of the textile industry on the environment through these kinds of collaborations and through innovation. And I think it takes looking at natural materials, biomaterials, and even rethinking kind of the chemistry and the green chemistry that can go behind some of our synthetics that have become kind of the backbone of the textile industry in many cases, or certainly have been big contributors to environmental impact of the textile industry. I think we can actually utilize principles and things we now really understand and know how to apply, not just in a small laboratory setting, but at scale, to really just overarchingly change the impact and still provide consumers exciting new textiles for designs. But it takes a synergistic and collaborative approach at all levels, from design to distribution. So it's not, nobody gets a pass on being not part of the change. So.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I'm happy to be here with the different partners of WoTO. I think one of the things that we as a platform together really try to do is create a sort of a transparency into the supply chain. And I think that if I would have to explain what my dream would be for the future of material use of textile in this case, I would want to see a sort of our society as how we are treating on a global scale finances by reporting all the big companies that is beyond the borders of countries, but it's a sort of the global companies that are checked, that we check all the finances, all the taxes, where does everything come from? That type of transparency, that type of reporting that the big companies like Ernst & Young and PricewaterhouseCoopers do, I would want to see that there is not only reporting on financing to that level. I want to see it like reporting on social matters and on environmental matters to really make an industry transparent. And I believe that doing that in the textile industry, making every step along the way transparent, there is zero to hide behind. And then everything becomes a conversation where everybody can chip in to do better. And I think that's also why these platforms as WoTO are so important, to open it up together and to help each other move forward.
Thanks. Yeah, some really interesting points made there. I mean, I love, you know, that the topics of education, of, you know, kind of like informing the public on the benefits of different materials, and, you know, from chemical to natural is great. And I'm grateful that we have kind of such a wide range of experts in the field. One of the themes that I think you all touched on a bit in your responses was intersectionality, right? Like how important it is to kind of, you know, collaborate. And really that's why we're here, right? You're all collaborators on the WoTO platform. I'd be interested in hearing, you know, what the intersection between industries looks like in your work. Obviously, you're all in some way tied to the textile industry, but, you know, on a day-to-day basis, kind of, are there certain industries that you see coming together, and are there others that maybe you'd like to see more of a collaboration between? And take a couple seconds to think on it too. I know it's a bit of a.
I'll start again. I think intersectionality is quite common for the Woolmark company. I mean, just within our company, we're funded by the Australian wool growers to invest in both research and development on one side of the fashion spectrum, and marketing and PR on the other side. So we cover a lot of bases. I always like to say that we're kind of the dating service for the wool industry. So we're always looking to pair, you know, to make good partnerships out of the different tiers, all the way from our wool growers through to the material makers, through to the product makers, through to the customers, and really kind of be the hub that keeps it all together and keeps information from siloing and being kept. I think the transparency between parties is kind of the biggest challenge in partnership. Laying down what the expectation is at the start can really help to align the right parties who need to be there, and can kind of facilitate a smooth partnership too. So yeah, we work in the sector of intersectionality. That's kind of what I'm proud to say that we do.
Well, yeah, and I think from an educational standpoint, we also are very much in the space of intersectionality, and we have a great opportunity to work across disciplines and across boundaries that in individual kind of organizations working there, such as Woolmark, for example, who focus primarily on wool. We actually have the opportunity to work and contribute to research and development across many different types of textiles, and also help prepare graduates for those new roles that really do promote this idea of intersectionality, that provide opportunities for them during their studies to explore and understand the importance of design being considered as part of, or supply chain, I'm sorry, being considered as part of the design process, and understanding what materials they chose and how that actually has a true impact. I think these things are really, really important. And I think this intersectionality is something that we will see more and more of. And I think we will have designers who are much better informed and engineers who are much better informed at the design component as well.
Yeah, interesting question, because I think if you look at the textile industry, it's one of the most intransparent industries where it takes decades. Well, as you see on the panel, everybody has like an over 10 years experience to get access to the supply chain, to get access to actually what is the most innovative or what are the good solutions for everyday problems that you have to be able to create a product. So I think how I look at it, like a sort of how can you intersect or how can you actually open up that industry, is to challenge how it's built over the years, and also see how digitalization can make it more approachable and more how would I say it, more accessible for all creators or brands and companies that work with textile as a medium. And I think that is something that we as a group with WoTO really try to do, is say like, how can we get knowledge from experts and not say like, well, everybody needs to become an expert, but how can you get the knowledge from experts accessible for also everybody that starts? How can you let the new generation start at where we are or where we ended, instead of what I heard all my career? Well, figure it out first for yourself, or oh yeah, no, you're too small for that, or no, you cannot have access to that. So I think it is all about opening up and making the supply chain accessible for everybody to build upon. Think about how open source works in the tech industry. You create something amazing, you build upon it, and not patent it and hold everybody away from it, because that creates the awful world that we are in now.
Yes, and I also observed that in the past years, they are more and more collaborative rather than the competitions, I would say. So and also people like I think there's quite a lot of kind of opportunities or platforms just being created to create a kind of open atmosphere for the people who can talk, because a lot of innovation development really just start from a kind of chit chat and kind of conversations, and then they grow, they build up on the ideas, and then they become a big success. So I also see that even in the textile industries, there are more consortiums now is also being created and focus on different kind of topics. But I see also the brands, they actually work together to tackle the problems and to find the solutions together to solve the problems. And not only in the textile industry, I also see that, for example, there are some projects just cross the industries like textile and automotive. So there are some products maybe is a kind of waste as a textile waste, but it can be upcycled into automotive, like injection molding parts. So in that case, you really see this kind of cross-industry collaborations more and more. And also you see there's a more collaboration even in the industries, not like less competitions, more collaborations now. I really see that. I think it become also kind of trends as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting as well to hear, I mean, about talking about opening it up and obviously providing the right tools, I think it's also giving that space for people that it's okay to ask questions and to not know, and it's okay to, you know, to give the spaces where it is. I mean, even with over 10 years, I think how many times, Sarah, do I ask not how it works? Because it's also a field of area that we don't necessarily know. So also for younger designers or brands, or actually everybody, how can we provide these tools that make it easier to develop and to produce, but also give the space and the confidence to ask the questions that you don't know, or to reach out for partners to really, collaboratively create something. And as you say, Houding, I mean, it's all starting from, from scratch, from having discussions and build something upon that. So I think that's, for me, really where we have the opportunity to create the intersections, being curious, being open, have room and space for questions, and obviously provide the right toolbox for the audience.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those detailed answers. I think what you said at the end really struck me, Eva, about, how important it is to not be afraid to ask questions, not be afraid to admit, there's stuff you don't know. And Borre talked about how, untransparent it is, right? There's so many steps that I think I, as a designer, at least, don't really, we send out the design card or whatever it may be, and then, it comes back to us. But a lot of that in between, we don't know. So kind of creating more transparency in that space is so important. One of the things that you all touched on that I found really interesting was education, and the importance on not just educating the consumers, right, but educating the designers, educating the creators. I definitely agree with that. But I'd also be interested in hearing how important it is for the government, for larger corporations to implement rules and laws that kind of either force transparency in the supply chain, or reduce the environmental impact of production and other steps in the creation cycle in the fashion industry.
Nice one. Well, I think there's the two sides, because education is, on the one hand, a sort of like what can you give and what people can take from it. But I think also it's getting to not only educate, but also really state that sort of the new generation should be the gatekeeper of doing better. To really like, it's not only a question or can you, but it's you have to. And there, I think you can really use legislation and lawmaking, but also like sort of the bigger companies to help them accountable for what they're doing. And I was saying that we are doing that earlier. I was saying that we do that in finances. There's a reporting on everything we do. If we don't do that well, and you don't pay your taxes, well, there's fining towards it. There's even jail time towards it. So I think looking at, hey, how can we make it fully transparent so that we can see what actually really is wasted in the industry, how much raw materials and energy are actually used in all the steps. And it's not about, oh, do I make a profit even with wasting? But the question is the full transparency, the beginning, the raw materials and the energy, in the end, how much product ends up really at an end consumer? And then actually, how much are those products actually used? So like usage per wear. And I think there we can see, like, at least from the steps, like, hey, what is the sell-through and what is the actual usage? We can ask for legislation, and we can ask for legislation on transparency, just as in the food industry, on every product. So I think that's a very important case.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, nothing to say against it. Aligned. I think that obviously is a key important aspect. And besides that, I think obviously there's a top-down approach. I think there's also the bottom-up approach that's key. I think there's a key aspect that also as consumers or users, obviously we have a big fair play to say in it. So we also actually have to maybe start demanding, for certain aspects, or transparency, as we talk about, and to ask these questions. So as designers or brands, we have this we need to have this curiosity, but also as users, and so I think it's a two sides, a bottom up and a top down approach that's really required in this area and field.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And also I think that the reporting system is really crucial. And what I see also in Europe that, for example, if you really want to claim that your product is sustainable, and then you have to have very accurate, precise data evidence to really support your claims. I think that this is a very big step to move forward. And I think it's also good for the consumers to really to know even deeper what, I know that many consumers, they are committed to buy the sustainable products, but before, just due to the lack of the knowledge and information, that they probably choose something not that sustainable. But now, when you see the implementation of regulations of this kind of policies, and it's really making it more transparent. And also we see that consumers get benefit on that, and also can make the right choice, which kind of values would they stand on. So I think this is a really good thing to do. And the reporting and the accurate data, I think that's really help to build the transparencies in the market, in the supply chain.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the things that brought to mind for me is this kind of common, I think, criticism we hear of sustainable and innovative textiles, in that like the amount of energy and resources that go into developing or creating such textiles often outweighs the fact that, oh, they're recycled cotton or organic or whatever keyword we might hear behind it. I was wondering if you guys have any thoughts on that, the cost of developing more sustainable textiles.
I mostly remember how to do.
Maybe I start with very interesting question, Noah, and indeed a contradiction, I think, to some extent. I think personally, first of all, before you even talk about what yarns to use, I think what's most important is, what are we building? What are we developing? What are we innovating for? What is really the needs and requirements that we are building, and what purposes does it need to be for wearing, for end of life? What is what we have in mind? And I think that starting base, or that aim and objective to create something for longevity and value, is also then actually helping you to make decisions along the supply chain. What machine technology to use, what is the best fiber or yarn combination, and what is the best stitch and structure, what is the best making method, and so on. And I think there, by working in a kind of reversed approach, in my opinion, you also have a reason and for your selection of what you choose or not to choose. And that also will actually, is it better to select recycled polyester or normal? What does it do with the life cycle? What does it do with the end use? So I think just picking recycled materials for the sake of recycled materials, I don't think that's necessarily giving you the end of value if the durability or the longevity is actually still becoming a throwaway garment. So working for me from the user needs, and to really kind of envision the full cycle. I mean, 80% of the design issues, obviously, or sustainable issues, derive at the early stage. I think can be a far reason. And yes, it means that there is resources involved in the development, in the R&D, in the innovation. If that's done for a purpose, and for something that really shifts the minds, I would vote for it. But if it's done for the sake of innovation, Sarah, maybe you have some further thoughts. Yeah.
No, I completely am aligned with your answer, Eva. I really love it. I think the word that keeps coming to me is intent. Like if you set an intent for the development and to, direct financial resource, human resource, supply chain resource to an intent-filled development, and you can substantiate that that intent was reached at the end of the development, who's to say that that investment isn't more worthy than just an off-the-shelf fabric product development to fulfill a SKU and to get a margin? You know, you're still using resources, but resources with great intent to solve problems and offer solutions to customers and to the sustainability of a product, to the purpose of it, to the physiological benefits of it, you know, whatever that intent is. If you can succeed with the investment of R&D, you've pushed our industry forward. And yeah, I'm very aligned with that.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I totally agree, and just want to also point out that I think to have a holistic pictures before you start to doing any kind of development. And I think just say, I think Eva, just to talk about the recycled PET, I think that's a really good example. So maybe from the more raw material point of view, it's really sustainable. But then if you're thinking about durability, you think about performance and the other function or the other performance, it could probably have some kind of disadvantage there. So I just want to say, just try to build up holistic pictures and also do the preparation work. And then just to be more precise as possible and to see, okay, what kind of purpose, what actually the market needs that you need to fulfill. I think that's very important. And then just put a resource there. And also the second one probably is a little bit, I would say, conflict, because preparations doesn't mean that you have to take so long time for this part. I also feel like take action is very important here, because in order to transfer the ideas, the studies into the real material, it also take times. So I think either you just transfer it and then you already get a benefit out of it, or you just take a much longer time just to do the first starting point, do the research, do the study, and do nothing. To me, actually the second part, if you only focus on studies, that's kind of waste. But if you can already turning the study, the research into a kind of products and fulfill the needs, fulfill the purpose, I think that's, to me, it's not really kind of waste. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I think it's interesting. Like, if you talk about like just is recycled material better than virgin material, I think in the end, like, I think we need to look at it on a global scale, because we all know now in this industry that it's intransparent, and in every step along the way there's overproduction. So we know that not all the raw materials, and not just, but a massive amount of all the raw materials and energy will never end up in a garment. Even if it ends up in a garment, it will never be worn, or even if it's worn, it's only worn a few times. So the efficiency is totally off. So I think the main question, like sort of like how to do better, is sort of what is the ultimate goal where we want to go. Like, I think we want to be in balance, not in our industry. We want to be in balance as humans, being part of nature, being part of this planet, and we have an X amount of resources that we get, and how can we balance that out every year again? And at this moment, I think it's called Earth Overshot Day. It's somewhere in the beginning of the year. We use all the resources that the planet gives us already in the beginning of the second quarter. The rest, we're just eating our planet. So like recycled materials, it's interesting to see like, hey, how can we sort of make a full circle, and how can we reuse products that we use? But I think the main question also is sort of, in general, we need to do less and better. So what does better mean? So it's like, first, let's understand what products we are going to make that are really used, and then ask the question, okay, what are we making those products of? And then I think at one point you're like, okay, do we prefer to recycle materials that are already there? And of course, you need innovation to look at what type of new solutions there are. And innovation always, well, is investment in energy and time, but it needs to sort of weigh out, and you need to look at how much innovation and time and energy you can spend and what it will save after. But I think it's on a lot of points, there's never one answer to doing better. It's very much sort of what is our holistic goal. And but I truly believe that, well, everybody that innovates and looks forward can move forward. If you're gonna stay still and keep on doing what you're doing, you're never gonna move forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love one thing you said, Borre, which is this idea of not only do we need to do better, but we also kind of need to do less, you know, and be very intentional about what we are doing, which goes back to Ava and Sarah's points earlier in the conversation about, you know, really understanding the purpose behind what we're making and making sure that it serves a purpose that isn't already being met.
I would even want to dare to say, not sort of, we got to maybe do less. There is no way we keep on growing like we're growing. There's literally no way. More and more people, but we're over producing everything. There's all the numbers say that there is not enough resources to keep on going like this. So the thing is, how do you balance that out? And that is a mindset, because like you only wear one set. Like it's also, how do we reset this whole industry? I think we need to be a lot harsher. And there is no sort of forever growth. There's balance. Nature, everything in nature is about balance. I think we're as human beings, a lot of times we're totally like off, and we have a misconception of like that we can always grow. I think parts can take over and parts can be done better. But at this moment, it's like a sort of like everything is possible in the name of financial growth. And I think that I totally disagree with.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I agree. We do need harsher language, and I think I was trying to be a little bit political in my wordage, but you're absolutely right. You know, we do need to make less and do less, and kind of think more about that balance that you spoke about. I want to kind of like shift the conversation back a little bit to collaboration and, you know, the ways that you as partners have been able to collaborate with other partners in the WoTO network. You know, if you could kind of talk a bit about, you know, what that collaboration has looked like thus far for you, and if there are, you know, goals that you'd like to get out of the WoTO community and the WoTO partnership going forward.
Oh, I want to start with this one. I think that's actually a great question to bring everybody back with. I think that the idea that we do need to do, quote, better, or we need to do less, that really requires changing everybody's mind shift about that. We need to do better in our manufacturing supply chain. We need to do better in our design process. We also need to do a better job communicating with our consumers so that they see the value in the product that we're actually producing out of the textile industry, and that they're thinking about its use. And part of that comes to understanding more about it. So I think the idea of transparency and teaching that and educating not just students who are studying textiles, but educating the community as a whole about how to reshift their mind things and how their choices actually drive things in many aspects of the supply chain. You know, businesses feel demand to do more for consumers, but consumers need to demand that they do better for them. We have to help consumers understand that. So I think education plays a big role in this, not just in the traditional classroom, but in our non-traditional classrooms as well.
I couldn't agree more, Karen. We just launched a campaign 2 days ago called Wear Wool, Not Fossil Fuel. We had done a little pilot exercise of research and found that 8 in 10 self-proclaimed sustainable consumers don't look at their label. They don't know what material they're buying. They shop maybe from a sustainable brand, and that's their perspective of sustainability, but they actually don't know what they're buying. And so I think you're right. Education is power, knowledge is power. And it can start at the student level, at the consumer level, to really educate, assuming that everybody's knows, a little bit about textiles is too much of an assumption. The general consumer does not know much about textiles at all. We need to lay some real strong foundational and accessible knowledge for consumers to make empowered choices. And I think, that's kind of the ecosystem of WoTO, is the accessibility and empowering creators, no matter what your, fiscal level is, no matter how big your brand is or how valid your concept is, but empowering them to, use the platform to see if their idea has legs, and then we can help them connect a good idea, some good intent to project partners within the WoTO ecosystem, educate at the same time that we are, pairing the idea with technology and manufacturing innovations that are out there to produce for them. But education's core to that ecosystem at WoTO.
So I want to save some time for questions, and we've already had 2 really interesting ones in the question and answer box. Ragnar, I am able to see it now, so I'll just kind of go ahead and read them. And if we have any extra time at the end of the conversation, I'll throw out a couple more questions to our panelists. But the first one is from Martha, who has a question for Hao, but I think, it'd be interesting to hear others' responses to it as well. As a producer of synthetics, is there any scenario that you could envision in which shorter, even local or regional, supply chains could become a reality? And she kind of goes on to talk about how important it is to have localization in economically regenerative systems. And you can see that, I think you all should be able to see those questions too in the question and answer box as well, if you'd like to see the full question.
Yeah, actually, I think now the trend is turning from the more globalization to the localization. What I also observed in the past years, I think one of the reason or trigger such kind of shifting is now brands, they are focused more on the circularities, and of course, and also the insecurities of the supply chain and happened in the past years, and also the raw material price varies per regions. These kind of facts also triggered more kind of localizations, and also the brands try to make the supply chain even shorter. And I mentioned about circularities, and circular supply chain also is a really good business model. Make all the stakeholders within the supply chains to talk to each other, to communicate to each other, to be more open and transparent. So I think for example, like in my companies, we used to produce everything in Asia and like supply to European market, but now we also get a lot of requests from the brands that they are start to shifting more sourcing the fabrics in Europe, yarns in Europe. So they also would like to build up or extend their European supply chain as well. So due to this kind of needs and the requirements, like as a raw material producers, we also start to establish our local supply chain. So yeah, I think this has become the trend, and yeah, it's become the realities. So yeah, I think that's what I can comment. Yeah.
I would love to add something to that, because I think what I find interesting on the question is that it also is like, yeah, well, this globalization of synthetics is not based on local heritage. And I think we need to realize that a sort of, even that we're right, we need to go back partly to local. We can never go back to local as how it was, because local is not small communities anymore. We're talking about local. Shanghai is over 20 million people. Local London is 8 million people. We're talking about local massive scale. So yes, we should not a sort of like a general clothing piece. If you take everything apart and send it back over the world, it has visited 4 continents. Of course, that is ridiculous if we start shipping everything everywhere. So I think we do need to go back to local, but also local at scale, and then seeing like, hey, what can we produce local at scale, and at the sizes what we are asking for now. And that's, again, like, we need to question if what we are asking for is still right, and that we can overproduce so much. But like, synthetics has been a big part of being able to provide what society created and has shopped for. So I think that is also a sort of, there's way more to it than just saying like, well, synthetics is not from heritage, or it's bad, or it's not, like, it doesn't grow back, or it comes from oil. Because I think it's not that we can, as humans, we also not say like, well, McDonald's is not super healthy food, but like, does that mean that it couldn't exist? So I think it is all about what do we use for what, and how can we balance that out, and how can we make sure that it fits within us living in how do you get in synergy with the planet and nature, because we're not excluded from that. So, but local means scale at this point.
Okay, those were both amazing responses, and I think a really great question. So thank you, Martha, for spearheading the Q&A. I'm gonna move forward because we did have a couple others, and please feel free to, add your questions into the chat. The next one is from Julia Helms, and it's just targeted at the general panel. What role does the media play in rethinking and restructuring the textile industry?
Hopefully it won't get too crazy though. Hopefully it'll be discussed. Yeah.
I don't want to jump on everything, but I can. Well, I think there's a few very funny examples. I was searching for them for a presentation I was doing, how the media and how marketing pushed scaling up things that we all know are bad now. So sort of, there were old commercials in from the beginning of the 90s, I think they were, the end of the 80s, like, that were literally saying like, oh, why would you do dishes? You have throwaway plates now. Like, don't be silly, just use this. And it was just sort of pushing throwaway economy, and also how media sort of pushed fast fashion, like, oh, but it's accessible for everybody. Everybody can have new clothing every day. But not asking the question sort of, who is paying for that? Because also, if I would say now, everybody that is looking at this, and all of us in the panel deserve a Ferrari, every month a new one, we would all understand that that is ridiculous, because there's not so many produced, there's not the resources for it, it's way too expensive. But actually it's the same with new clothing. The only thing is, somebody somewhere, and the mother nature is paying for these things. And I think that's a sort of like, media has an enormous role to sort of translate transparency, and they need to understand what the power is that can happen if we say things.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Borre. So I think media really play a very important role here. And to me, it is more like a tool what we can use. And we already talk a lot about education, how to educate the consumers. I think in that case, media really play a very important role. But of course, there's a lot of alignment and communication transparencies that we need to help, or we need to support media to make the right kind of story, right message to the whole populations, let's see. And at the end, I think it's, yeah, as I mentioned, communications is really important. And also as all the stakeholders, let's say in the textile industries, we need to be sure that all the messages will be delivered precisely, and to make sure that everything is transparent towards the consumers. And I think the media also now, I see they are start to pick up all these kind of stories, and they are a bit more positive to tell the stories about sustainability. I think this is really kind of big step forward. Yeah, I think, but of course, I think they can even play more important roles in terms of communication, in terms of education as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to hear others' opinions, but I also want to get to the rest of the questions from our audience before we have to go. So the next question is from Jennifer. What metrics are being used to measure how sustainable brands really are? And how do we gain more transparency in the supply chain to overcome the rampant greenwashing that exists in the market? And I think it would be interesting to kind of hear from Sarah from that kind of like corporate level, and Ava as well. It'd be really, really cool to hear your thoughts.
This is what metrics are being used to measure sustainability. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So sustainability is super complex, and there's a lot of like measurement systems and third parties that are now in place for brands to use, to plug into those models. But now we see, like with the EU Labeling Act, governments getting involved in applying some of like these models into how sustainable a product is on a label, so informing consumers that way. But some of the issues with those models is they don't necessarily measure apples to apples, fibers to fibers, from cradle to grave. Some start at the maybe raw material source and kind of end at the manufacturing source. We don't actually look like, how long does this product stay in your closet? And when you get rid of it, does it pollute? Does it biodegrade? What does it do? Does it shed microplastics into our ocean? And since we're missing like that full picture of a life cycle, I think we're preemptively trying to apply it through legislation and government and educating consumers, which could do a lot more harm than good if the models aren't accurate. So while there's efforts being made, if the effort's not sound, it could do more damage than good, actually. So we have to be, you have to educate yourself as a consumer. There's a lot of common sense that needs applied. If something is renewable and it's biodegradable, those are like two really primary considerations about what sort of impact that material will have, or that fiber will have. And if we just rely on legislation and governments to tell us and, follow like sheep, not that anything's wrong with being a sheep, but if we do act like sheep and don't think for ourselves, we could get conned. Exactly like Borre said, if we're throwing plates away instead of washing them and putting them back in our cupboard, and that's the new innovation, and we get caught up in that media circus or that pressure, it will probably be subject to consuming unwisely. So I think we have to apply common sense, and we all have it. We just need to turn it on.
Yeah, I mean, fully aligned, and I don't think as much to add on that legislation part, but obviously also the part that is maybe not legislated is how are you using it yourself? How many times do you wash it? What do you do with it? I mean, there's numbers and I don't know all the accurate figures, but I think 40% of the water we use actually because of the wash and wear. So what can we do there? And obviously that's an evolve area as well, or do we throw it away, or do we reuse it, or all the other aspects as well. So legislation obviously is part of the process, but there's also the other side, and what can we do there in order to also better make use of our more beautiful textiles, because I think at the end of the day, it's also a very beautiful industry, and the textiles are, I think, so much close to us, our sensations of what we wear and where we live and what we use. And I think this is sometimes also completely blurred, obviously, by all the nasty things that happen in the industry.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think all of us here today have that same passion for clothing and beautiful textiles, and it's important to not disregard that, but also to kind of keep in mind all the things we've said today about the importance of reducing the waste and the kind of like ugly side of this industry, right? Because I think that oftentimes, while we may be as informed consumers and creators are aware of the ugliness in the industry, a lot of the people who just see the ads on TV and the runway shows don't have as much of a, maybe it's not information, but passion for kind of making the back end as beautiful as the front end. One last question. We only have a couple of minutes, so maybe if one of the panelists could answer this. It's from Yasir, who's in Italy, and he asks, what are your suggestions for convincing manufacturers to open the closed doors and make their process transparent, keeping in view that they have immense pressure from investor to reduce the cost of doing and increase profit?
It's interesting, because I think for a lot of the partners at WoTO, they want to show what they do well, and they want to also show that and that's also the question from the industry. So I believe it's a very old way of thinking. Like, if you keep things for yourself and you keep only things for financial benefit, it is not, I think, the right incentive, but also an old incentive to say like, well, that will make me grow, that will make me stay ahead, to not tell what I do differently. Because if you work together, and you see that in the tech industry, where sort of when you open source things and you build upon these innovations, and you build upon the good things that you start to be able to work together. You start to be able to not have to reinvent the wheel, and you actually move forward way faster together than that you can ever do by yourself. And you see that some of the big players that have a monopoly that thought, oh yeah, I can stay ahead, but that the moment we gather strength, that you can move forward. So I think it's a matter of time when you see that working together is more lucrative, and that a transparent supply chain and a transparent product will to really be the only way to go. And there are a lot of examples where it's the industry already proven it in certain parts of the industry. For instance, in interior, like in interior, an average price that is sometimes, well, if you say an average price of fashion textiles is 5 to 10 euros, in interior it's 35 to 50. And that's not because they don't use a lot of textiles or that they don't want to have margins. It's because there is rules and regulations that they have to follow to get to a certain extent of quality, fire retardantness, a lifetime span, a lot of these steps. So I think it is super interesting to see that there's so much examples in the industry where working together and working with regulations, that it is possible to up the price, to make sure that it is more transparent, that we can do it better. So I think it's just a matter of time for suppliers to see it.
Yeah, thank you for that response, Borre. And I just wanted to thank all that concludes our session. It's 2, but it was such a pleasure getting to listen to all of you and facilitate this conversation. And one of the participants asked if the recording will be available online. It will. I believe you can find that information on the New York Textile Month website. So yeah, just thank you again. And you know, hopefully we'll have more conversations like this in the future.
And I was just saying, I see still a few questions. I will jump on the questions to see if I can answer. So if the people that ask this question wanna hang in, I will reply on them.
Perfect, thank you. And please, any other panelists who'd like to do the same, I'm sure it would be welcomed.
Have a great one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So Julia, I see here, what role does the media play? Oh yeah, that we done. I hope that was clear. Let me see. We did Jennifer with the Matrix, Muhammad, that was from the Italian, to convince the manufacturers. I hope that was okay. Recycled polyester, I see Muhammad, which was treated with chlorine, and also during washing the micro particles enter in the water. So what's the view of panel on this? Well, I think for me, I think looking at the amount of microfiber shedding, and I think especially throughout the years, seeing that fleece, that was a very functional textile for sports, and I think still believe we can develop things that are very beneficial for our lives, but then how do we scale that, and do we scale it for the right reasons? I think when we realized that microfiber shedding was such a big thing in washing polyesters and especially fleeces, and I think there are a lot of innovations going on. There are certain manufacturers, like for instance a Merrill and a Nile Star, that really focus on, hey, how can we make, for instance, nylons that have 0 microfiber shedding? So then we can see what type of material do we choose for what type of garment. And I think that is interesting. And that's also how I think we should look at it. There is no one answer, but if we find a problem, let's see if there is another answer. I hope that answered your question, Mohammed. Did the pandemic encourage the use of recycled materials, or did it make any difference towards how customers buy products? Well, I have a personal view on that. I thanks for the question. It was anonymous, but I think that in general, the pandemic, made us think about how supply chains are set up, how shipping is set up, that not everything is for granted. There is no unlimited amount of materials. It all comes from somewhere, and we saw that the moments that those routes are broken or we cannot supply it anymore, people cannot work, that it actually runs out. And I think it was very good for a lot of the bigger companies, and also the understanding within the supply chain that some of these things need to change. So a lot of younger and smaller initiative came up to rethink parts of the supply chain. So I believe it really set a lot of good things in motion. And regarding if people would use more recycled materials, I think it is a part of the trend that we want to understand, and that we want to tell a better story. But I believe that was in a lot of times still a cover-up for sort of greenwashing. Well, we do one step very good. We try to recycle, but I think where we need to go is full transparency, because behind full transparency, we cannot hide. And then sometimes recycled materials will be the amazing solution, and sometimes it actually maybe is not. I hope that answers your question. I missed the beginning of this. Will the recordings be there? Well, that was mentioned, definitely is there. Thank you, Noah, for moderating, and TransUnion for facilitating. And thank you for all the speakers for sharing the experience. Well, pleasure. That was the questions that were here. So thank you very much all for having a look and tuning in on us. I hope I hope I triggered and we all triggered you to think about how we work and how we collaborate, and also that we have access towards these things. So any questions, pop in on WoTO. You can find it through our BYBORRE.com, and just shoot out an email with any questions, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. Have a great one.
Amazing, Borre. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Ragnar.
And we'll
Thank you all.
upload the video.